As in all knowledge, Goal 8 of SDG promotes sustained economic growth, higher levels of productivity and technological innovation. Meanwhile, the major theme of our video is inflation in an economy in the Fiqh perspective. So here we will look at the relationship between economic growth and inflation. Most countries want to achieve a long-term, rapid economic growth. It has been difficult to reach such a goal due to the numerous elements that influence economic growth. The central subjects of macroeconomic policy are economic growth and the inflation rate. Inflation is one of many variables that can be identified as a predictor of economic growth. However, there is no definitive answer to the relationship between economic growth and inflation. Researchers research inflation and economic growth and arrive at various conclusions. It has sparked debate in both theory and empirical findings. The contentious issue concerning economic growth and inflation is their relationship. Let us concentrate on the positive relationship. Inflation, according to structuralists, is crucial for economic growth. For example, according to neoclassical theories, inflation boosts economic growth by altering the income distribution in favor of higher saving capitalists. Here are 5 questionnaires that will be answered in the next part of the discussion, which is what is inflation, problems of inflation, causes of inflation, inflation in the Islamic perspective, and how inflation can be controlled. So what is inflation? In economics, inflation is a general increase in the prices of goods and services in an economy. When the general price level rises, each unit of currency buys fewer goods and services. Inflation makes everything you buy more expensive, so the value of your money will decrease. For example, a taco that priced $2 in 2010 but increased in $2.25 in 2020. This is due to sustained inflation that has been occurring over time. In this case, the price change reflects a 25% inflation over 10 years. Inflation is classified into 3 types, which is demand pull, cost push, and built-in inflation. Demand pull inflation is a situation where consumer demand for goods and services in an economy persistently exceeds the available supply when the economy is near or at full employment. Demand pull inflation is caused by excess demand, which can originate from high exports, strong investment, and rise in money supply. Cost push inflation is a result of the increase in the overall prices of production process inputs. For example, an increase in the cost of labor or raw material will lead to higher overall production costs. Lastly, built-in inflation occurs as the price of goods and services increases along the demand for higher wages in order to maintain the cost of living, would then result in the basket of goods and services getting more expensive.
Inflation imposes problems to many people, especially savers, who sacrifice consumption in the present in the hope of increasing their savings to meet greater level of future expenditure. Same goes to fixed income earners because their budget only limited by personal savings. So the only way for them to expand their purchasing power in the future is through good investment returns. So their expectations are frustrated if inflation heals their fund purchasing value. Inflation also wreaks havoc on market economy long-term macroeconomic performance by decreasing total factor productivity. A high amount of inflation usually causes prices change. This can be costly for business and slow individuals' optimal net income. It also causes larger predicting error by shifting the input data of prices, pushing the enterprise to spend extra time and extra resources to make decisions and protect themselves from price instability impact, making the economic efficiency in danger. Inflation can affect purchasing power over time for a variety of reasons. Example, pensioners who are promised a 5% yearly increase in their pension. So if inflation exceeds that 5%, a pensioner income will be decreased. Purchasing power is declining. So on the other hand, a borrower would benefit from paying a 5% fixed rate mortgage because the real interest rate, which is the nominal rate minus the inflation rate, would be 0 with 5% inflation. So the payment would be difficult. But if inflation were higher, paying off this debt would be even easier. As long as the borrower income stays in line with the inflation, the credit will be allowed. Of course, the lender income will fall. Households are worse off if the nominal income which they receive in current money does not increase at the same levels as prices, because they can't afford only to buy few items. So put it another way, their purchasing power or real income drops. The living standards are measured by real income. The standard of living rises in line with the actual income increases, and conversely, prices fluctuate at various rates in reality. Some, like the price of traded commodities, changes every day. Others, like contract-based pay, take longer to adjust because of their stickiness. So in an inflationary environment, irregularly rising prices end up putting some individuals' purchasing power, and this loss of real income is probably the most important consequences of inflation.
Causes of inflation. Inflation is a significant economic factor that affects everyone's finance. A variety of factors can influence pricing or inflation in an economy. In most cases, inflation is caused by a rise in production costs or an increase in demand for goods and services. The first cause of inflation is demand pull inflation. In the broadest sense, and assuming ceteris paribus conditions, if the economy is at or near full employment, a rise in aggregate demand raises the price level. Conversely, a drop in aggregate demand correlates to a lower price level. As enterprises achieve full capacity, they respond by raising their prices, which causes inflation. The rise in aggregate demand that drives demand pull inflation can be caused by a variety of economic factors. For example, an increase in government expenditure might boost aggregate demand, causing prices to rise. Rapid international expansion can also spark a spike in demand as more exports are consumed by foreigners. Finally, when a government lowers taxes, families have more discretionary cash in their pockets. This in turn increases consumer confidence, which stimulates consumer spending. The exchange rate also can be a cause of inflation. According to Ferrero and Seneca 2015, a central bank with a responsibility to maintain a stable CPI may boost interest rates to reduce the inflationary impact of depreciation on the currency rate. The Consumer Price Index (CPI) is a broad indicator of economic inflation in relation to the cost of goods and services. When inflation is excessively low, a central bank such as the Federal Reserve may lower interest rates to stimulate economic activity. When inflation becomes too high, interest rates may be hiked to keep prices stable. By raising interest rates, a customer may be more tempted to save money rather than spend it, owing to the potential return from putting it in a bank. The entire volume of products and services produced by an economy at a particular price level is referred to as aggregate supply. Thus, cost-push inflation occurs when the demand for commodities remains unchanged, while the supply of goods decreases due to rising production costs. As a result, greater manufacturing costs are passed on to customers through higher finished goods prices. Costs may also rise due to increase in raw material price. This might be due to a scarcity of raw resources, an increase in labor costs to create the raw materials, or an increase in the cost of importing raw materials. The government may potentially raise taxes to cover increasing gasoline and energy expenses, requiring businesses to devote more resources to tax payments. Wages have an impact on production costs and are often the single largest expense for enterprises. Labor is one of the most expensive aspects of running a business, as any business owner knows. Employee wages, benefits, payroll, and other associated taxes are all part of the labor cost, which may account for up to 70% of overall business expenditures.
Inflation based on Islamic economy. In the Islamic economic system, inflation is not a major economic problem in the aggregate, because the currency is stable with the use of the dinar and dirham currencies. A decline in values is still possible, namely when the value of gold that support the nominal value of the dinar decreases, among others due to the discovery of gold in large quantities, but the situation is very unlikely. According to Islamic economists, inflation is very bad for the economy because it causes disturbance to the function of money, especially to the saving function. The function is advance payment, and the function of the unit of account, weakening the spirit of saving and attitudes towards saving from the community. increase the tendency to shop especially for non-primary and luxury goods, directing investment to non-productive things, namely accumulating wealth such as land, building, precious metal, and foreign currencies, at the expense of investment toward productive activities such as agriculture, animal husbandry, mining, industrial, trade, transportation, and service, and others. Taqiyuddin Ahmad Ibn al-Maghrizi, who is an economist Muslim and also one of Ibn Khaldun's students, classifies inflation into two groups. First is natural inflation. This type of inflation caused by natural justification, which people have no control. Ibn al-Maghrizi said that this inflation is inflation caused by a decrease in aggregate supply or an increase in aggregate demand. Second is human error inflation. This inflation is caused by human error that deviates or violates the rules and regulation of Sharia. As the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means, corruption has appeared on land and at the sea due to the action of human hands, so that Allah may feel for them some of the result of their action, so that they will return to the right path. Surah Ar-Rum verses 41. Human error inflation in the Sharia system can be grouped according to its causes as follow: corruption and bad administration.
Now I will talk about controlling inflation in the Islamic economy. The most effective use of zakat may be maintaining price stability, because zakat can be delivered in two ways: consumptive and productive. This is correct. As a result, a rise in aggregate demand is always accompanied by an increase in aggregate supply. Zakat distributed for consumption will increase aggregate demand, whereas zakat distributed for productive purposes will increase aggregate supply. A boost in aggregate demand, on the other hand, will initially inflate the aggregate price. The price, however, remains stable since the increase in aggregate demand is accompanied by an increase in aggregate supply as a result of the distribution of zakat in its productive form. Inflation can be effectively controlled through fiscal policy. A drop in government spending causes a change in aggregate demand to the left and downward. This leads to a decrease in the price level for a given aggregate supply. As a result, government downsizing lowers the rate of inflation. Increasing taxes is another approach to lower the rate of inflation. The aggregate supply can also be influenced by fiscal policy. Reduced or eliminated skewed taxes, for example, will result in an increase in aggregate supply and a decrease in the price level. Furthermore, directing government spending mostly to infrastructure investment results in a rightward shift in aggregate supply and a decrease in the price level. Another strategy to keep inflation under control is to use an income policy. This strategy comprises a government action to manage wage rates, prices, and profit margins. An income policy shortens the periods of transition from high to low projected inflation. The money supply is fully endogenous in an Islamic economic system, and it is generated by certain interest-free loans from the central bank to the banking system. The banking system lends the money to business on the basis of profit risk-sharing arrangements. As a result, the loans are channeled toward the productions of goods and services in order to ensure that the investment pays for itself. The central bank is finally paid back for the loans. This ensures that productive assets will always back a society's money. In conclusion, the two most significant parts of macroeconomic policy are economic growth and inflation. There are several causes of inflation, which are an increase in the cost of production or an increase in the demand for products and services. Cost boost inflation occurs when prices rise as a result of rising manufacturing costs. Demand pull inflation occurs when there is a high level of client demand for a product or service. Furthermore, inflation gives a negative impact on the long-term macroeconomic performance of market economies by lowering total factor productivity. Price increases are common when inflation is significant, which can be costly for business and impede individuals' optimal net income. However, it is not a big economic issue in the Islamic economic system. Inflation is detrimental to the economy. According to Islamic economists, since it disrupts the function of money, particularly of the saving function, advance payment function, and unit of account function. This inflation needs to be controlled by establishing zakat, having a fiscal policy, using an income policy, and other than that. As a result, inflation has resurfaced as a major concern, and the government primary emphasis on microeconomic management. Policies makers must strike the correct balance between supporting demand and growth when necessary while avoiding overstimulation and inflation. That's all from us, and thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and bye.